Hey everyone, tonight we begin with something that might just be the perfect antidote to your racing thoughts and endless scrolling. We're stepping into the smoky, candlelit halls of medieval Europe to explore what dining was really like when your biggest concern wasn't your Wi-Fi connection, but whether the guy next to you had bathed this month. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And let me know in the comments where you're tuning in from and what time it is for you. It's always fascinating to see who's joining us from around the world. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. Picture this. You've just received an invitation to dine at a medieval castle. Not the sanitized Disney version with singing teapots and perfectly choreographed dance numbers, but the real deal. The kind where the floor is covered in rushes that haven't been changed in months, where dogs wander freely between tables hoping for scraps, and where the person serving your wine might very well be the same person who mucked out the stables that morning. Welcome to medieval dining-etiquette exist, where ATD, hygiene was optional, and every meal was an adventure in survival. The Great Hall stretches before you like a cavern lit by flickering torches and smoking candles. The ceiling disappears into shadows above, and tapestries hang colours muted by centuries of smoke and neglect from stone walls. The direct. Long wooden tables are arranged in careful hierarchy, with the Lord's table elevated on a platform at the far end of the hall, while everyone else is seated according to their station in life. The closer you sit to the salt, the more important you are. And trust me, in medieval times, your proximity to seasoning was a very serious matter indeed. As you take your assigned seat on a wooden bench, because individual chairs were largely a luxury reserved for the highest nobility, you notice the table setting before you. There's no gleaming silverware arranged with military precision. Instead, you'll find a wooden trencher, which is essentially a thick slice of stale bread that serves as your plate. Sometimes it's an actual wooden bowl, but bread plates were common and practical. After the meal, the trencher would be soggy with juices, and either eaten by the diner, given to the poor, or fed to the animals. Waste nothing, want nothing, as they say. Your eating utensil situation is rather limited. You have a knife, which you've brought yourself because cutlery wasn't provided by the host. This knife serves multiple purposes throughout your day, from eating to general utility work, so hopefully you've given it a quick wipe since you last used it to clean your fingernails. Forks are virtually non-existent in medieval Europe. They won't become common for centuries, and when they do appear, they'll be viewed with suspicion as unnecessarily fussy foreign inventions. Your fingers and a spoon are your primary tools for getting food from trencher to mouth, which makes for interesting dining dynamics when you consider that hand-washing facilities are basic at best. The absence of individual drinking vessels means you'll be sharing a communal cup with your table mates. This goblet, made of wood, pewter, or if you're dining with the wealthy, perhaps silver, gets passed around the table. Everyone drinks from the same vessel, which in an age before germ theory was simply the way things were done. You quickly learn the unspoken etiquette of wiping the rim before passing it along, though this gesture is more about removing visible food particles than any concern about disease transmission. As you settle into your seat, the first thing that strikes you about medieval dining is the noise. This isn't the gentle murmur of a modern restaurant. The great hall echoes with conversation, laughter, the clatter of wooden bowls, dogs barking, and the occasional burst of music from travelling minstrels. Conversations happen at volume levels that would be considered shouting today, partly because the acoustics of stone halls demand it, and partly because medieval people simply lived their lives at a higher decibel level than we're accustomed to. The lighting is dim and atmospheric in a way that Instagram filters try desperately to recreate. Candles made from animal fat flicker and smoke, creating an amber glow that dances across faces and throws moving shadows on the walls. The smell of melting tallow mingles with the aroma of roasting meat, unwashed bodies, wet wool, and the earthy scent of the rushes covering the floor. It's a sensory experience that would overwhelm modern sensibilities. But for medieval diners, it was simply the backdrop of communal dining. Before any food appears, there are rituals to observe. A servant approaches with a basin of water and a towel for hand washing. This isn't the quick rinse we might give our hands before a meal today. Hand washing in medieval times is a ceremonial act, performed with great attention to propriety because your hands are your primary eating utensils. The water is poured over your hands from a decorative ewer, and you wash carefully, knowing that everyone at the table is watching and judging your technique. The blessing of the food is another essential ritual. The entire hall falls silent as a priest or the lord of the manor offers a prayer of thanksgiving. This isn't a quick moment of gratitude. Medieval prayers before meals could be lengthy affairs, acknowledging God's providence, asking for continued blessings, and sometimes including prayers for the souls of the departed. During this time, you stand with head bowed, hands folded, trying not to let your stomach growling echo too loudly in the sudden quiet of the great hall. When the blessing concludes and the meal officially begins, the first course arrives with great fanfare. But don't expect your food to arrive hot from the kitchen. Medieval kitchens were often located in separate buildings from the Great Hall to reduce fire risk, which meant food travelled considerable distances before reaching your trencher. By the time dishes made their way from hearth to table, carried by a parade of servants through corridors and courtyards, they were lukewarm at best. The serving style follows strict protocols based on medieval social hierarchy. The lord and lady are served first, with great ceremony and attention to detail. Their food is presented on the finest dishes available, often silver or elaborate pottery, and they're offered the choicest portions. Then service proceeds down the social ladder, with each rank receiving food appropriate to their station. The closer you sit to the high table, the better your food, and the more attention you receive from the serving staff. What arrives on your trencher depends entirely on your social status and the wealth of your host. If you're dining with nobility during a feast day, you might see an impressive array of dishes that would challenge even modern appetites. But if you're a common guest at an ordinary meal, your options are considerably more modest. Medieval, on a strict dining, operates hierarchy of who gets what, when, and how much. The concept of courses exists in medieval dining, but not in the way we understand them today. Rather than the appetizer, main course, and dessert progression we're familiar with, medieval meals are served in what they call courses or services. Each course consists of multiple dishes served simultaneously, creating a buffet-style arrangement where diners can choose from several options. The first course might include soup, roasted meat, bread, and vegetables all arriving at once, followed later by a second course with different combinations of foods. Portion control is not a medieval concept. When food is abundant, which happens mainly during harvest celebrations or important feast days, the quantities can be staggering. Medieval cooks operate under the philosophy that it's better to have too much food than too little, because running out of food during a feast is a social catastrophe that reflects poorly on the host's wealth and generosity. Better to have leftovers that can be distributed to servants and the poor than to face the embarrassment of empty platters. The actual act of eating requires skills that modern diners have never needed to develop. Without forks, you must master the art of eating with your fingers while maintaining some semblance of dignity and cleanliness. There are unspoken rules about which fingers to use for which foods, how to tear meat properly, and the correct way to dip bread into communal dishes without contaminating the entire serving. You learn quickly that eating with all 5 fingers marks you as uncouth, while using only your thumb, index, and middle finger demonstrates proper breeding and education. The bread on your table serves multiple purposes beyond simple sustenance. It's your plate, your napkin, and sometimes your utensil all rolled into one. The art lies in knowing when to use it for which purpose. You might tear off a piece to soak up the juices from your meat, use another section to wipe your fingers clean, and save the edges to scoop up the last bits of pottage from your bowl. Nothing goes to waste, and the soggy, flavorful bread that remains at the end of the meal is often the most satisfying part. Sharing food from communal dishes requires a delicate dance of etiquette and timing. You can't simply reach across the table whenever hunger strikes. There's a rhythm to communal dining that you must learn to read. You wait for the appropriate moment, take your only fair share, and never double dip or contaminate the serving dish with your personal utensils. The person closest to each dish serves as its guardian, ensuring everyone at the table gets their portion before anyone takes seconds. Wine flows freely during these meals, but it's not the refined vintage you might expect. Medieval wine is often young and frequently harsh watered down to make it last longer and reduce its potency. Beer and ale are more common beverages, served in various strengths depending on the time of day and the occasion. The morning might call for small beer, a weak brew safe enough for children, while evening feasts feature stronger ales that loosen tongues and encourage merriment. The entertainment during dinner is as important as the food itself. Travelling minstrels might perform between courses, singing songs of courtly love, heroic deeds, or humorous tales that make the entire hall erupt in laughter. Jesters tell jokes that range from clever wordplay to crude humour that would make modern audiences blush. Sometimes there are more elaborate performances with acrobats, dancers, or storytellers whose attention of dozens can hold the of diners while they eat. Conversation at the table follows its own set of rules and expectations. Topics range from local gossip to discussions of politics, religion, and the latest news from. But you must be careful about what you say and neighbouring territories to whom. A careless comment about the Lord's policies or an offhand remark about church doctrine could land you in serious trouble. Medieval dining halls are places where alliances are formed, marriages are arranged, and business deals are struck, all while tearing into a leg of mutton. The pace of medieval dining is leisurely by modern standards. Meals can stretch for hours, not because the food takes long to consume, but because dining is a social event that encompasses far more than mere eating. It's a time for community building, information sharing, and strengthening the bonds that hold medieval society together. You don't simply eat and leave. You participate in an elaborate social ritual that reinforces hierarchy, demonstrates hospitality, and celebrates the communal aspects of human existence. As the meal progresses, the behaviour at the table becomes increasingly relaxed. Voices grow louder, laughter more frequent, and the formal protocols of the early courses give way to a more casual atmosphere. Dogs grow bolder in their quest for scraps, sometimes successfully begging food directly from diners' hands. Servants move more freely through the hall, refilling cups and clearing away the debris of consumed courses. The food story of Medievald itself tells the life in every bite. Preservation techniques dominate the flavours, with salt, smoke, and spices masking the taste of meat that might be past its prime. Vegetables are often overcooked by modern standards, boiled until soft and seasoned heavily to make them palatable. Fruits appear mainly in preserved forms, dried or cooked into sweet preparations that concentrate their flavours and extend their shelf life. Spices, when they appear, are used with a heavy hand that might shock contemporary palates. Pepper, cinnamon, ginger, and other exotic seasonings are status symbols as much as flavour enhancers. A dish heavily spiced with imported seasonings announces the wealth and sophistication of the host, while also attempting to create flavours bold enough to overcome the limitations of medieval food storage and preparation techniques. The medieval kitchen operates under constraints that would challenge any modern chef. Cooking times are estimated rather than precisely measured. Temperatures are controlled by moving pots closer to or farther from the fire. Seasonings are added by taste and experience rather than exact recipes. Yet somehow, meals emerge that satisfy the diners and fulfill the social functions that medieval dining serves. As you observe the elaborate dance of medieval dining, you begin to understand that this is about much more than consuming calories. Every aspect of the meal, from the seating arrangements to the serving order to the topics of conversation, reinforces the social structure that holds medieval society together. Food is power, hospitality is politics, and sharing a meal is an act of trust in a world where trust is a precious commodity. The hours pass slowly in the great hall, marked by the changing light filtering through high windows and the progression of courses that continue to arrive from the distant kitchen. Your wooden trencher grows soggy with accumulated juices, your shared cup makes countless circuits of the table, and your understanding of medieval life deepens with every bite, every conversation, and every small ritual that makes up this elaborate communal experience. The entertainment between courses grows more elaborate as the evening progresses. A troupe of acrobats tumbles through the hall, their colourful costumes a stark contrast to the earth-toned clothing of most diners. They leap over benches, balance on each other's shoulders, and perform feats that make the audience gasp and applaud. The Lord tosses them coins, which they catch with theatrical bows before continuing their performance. But it's not all organised entertainment. Arguments break out over dice games in the corners of the hall. Someone's hound steals an entire roasted fowl from a platter and races between the tables with half the hall in pursuit. A young page trips while carrying a pitcher of wine, sending the contents splashing across a merchant's finest robes, which leads to heated words and demands for compensation. The serving staff navigates these minor disasters with practiced efficiency. They've seen it all before: spilled wine, food fights, drunken guests sliding under tables, marriage proposals shouted across the hall, and the occasional duel challenge issued over perceived slights. Medieval dining halls are theatres of human drama where the alcohol flows as freely as the emotions. As you watch a particularly animated discussion about wool prices between two merchants, you notice the subtle ways power dynamics play out, even in casual conversation. The merchant speaks to the salt seated closer with more authority. His companion defers to his opinions and laughs a bit too loudly at his jokes. Position at the table translates directly to social influence, and everyone understands the rules without them ever being spoken. The children present at the feast operate. They're their own set of expectations to a separate table or under not relegate, hidden away in some distant nursery. Medieval children participate in adult social functions from an early age, learning proper behaviour through observation and occasional sharp correction from their elders. You watch a young boy, perhaps 7 or 8 years old, carefully mimicking the eating style of the man beside him, trying to master the complex fingerwork required to eat gracefully without utensils. The serving of each new course becomes a small ceremony in itself. Trumpeters might announce particularly elaborate dishes. The carving of large roasts happens at the high table with great flourish, the carver rating his skill with theatrical precision. The best demons portions are ceremonially presented to the most important guests, while the remainder is distributed according to the rigid social hierarchy that governs every aspect of medieval life. Between the third and fourth courses, a storyteller rises to entertain the hall. His voice carries across the room as he weaves a tale of knights and dragons, his words painting vivid pictures that capture the imagination of diners from the highest lord to the lowest servant. Medieval people are hungry for stories in a world where books are rare and literacy limited. The oral tradition thrives in settings like this, where skilled performers can hold an audience spellbound with nothing but their voice and gestures. The fire in the great hearth crackles and pops, sending occasional sparks up the massive chimney. The warmth it provides is welcome, but the smoke that occasionally billows into the room when the wind shifts makes eyes water and adds another layer to the complex aromatic atmosphere of the hall. You learn to position yourself to avoid the worst of the smoke while still benefiting from the heat. As the meal continues, you begin to notice the subtle signs of medieval food safety practices. Bread is examined carefully before eating, checked for mold or unwanted additions. Wine is sniffed before drinking, not for bouquet appreciation, but to detect spoilage. Meat is inspected for signs of decay, and anything questionable is quietly set aside. Without refrigeration or reliable preservation methods, diners must rely on their senses to avoid foods that might make them ill. The conversation topics shift as the alcohol takes effect. Early in the evening, discussions focused on practical matters like trade, weather, and local politics. Now the talk turns to more personal subjects. Marriage negotiations are conducted in hushed tones. Old feuds are rehashed with growing passion. Romantic liaisons are hinted at with meaningful glances and carefully coded language. You observe a fascinating courtship ritual playing out at a nearby table. A young knight is attempting to impress a merchant's daughter through elaborate compliments and shows of his eating etiquette. He demonstrates his noble breeding by eating with perfect finger positioning, sharing his wine cup with elaborate ceremony, and reciting poetry between courses. The young woman responds with demure smiles and carefully modulated conversation, while her father watches the interaction with the calculating gaze of a man assessing a potential business partnership. The music grows louder as the evening progresses. What began as background melodies to accompany dining has evolved into more energetic performances designed to encourage dancing and celebration. Some diners push back from the tables to clear space for impromptu dancing. The steps are simple enough that even the slightly intoxicated can participate, and soon half the hall is moving to the rhythm of lute, drum, and pipe. The serving staff takes advantage of the distraction to begin clearing away the remnants of consumed courses. They work efficiently, stacking trenchers, collecting cups, and wiping down tables with practiced speed. The leftover food doesn't go to waste. Servants will eat well tonight, and anything remaining will be distributed to the poor who gather outside the castle gates after every feast, hoping for charity. As you watch the organized chaos of medieval dining unfold around you, you begin to understand how food functions as social glue in this society. Sharing meals creates bonds, reinforces hierarchies, and provides opportunities for the complex negotiations that keep medieval communities functioning. The feast is diplomacy, entertainment, and sustenance all rolled into one elaborate ritual. The progression of courses continues with dishes that challenge your modern preconceptions about medieval cuisine. A pie arrives that, when cut open, releases a flock of small birds that fly around the hall to the delight and amazement of the diners. This isn't just food, it's theatre. Another dish appears to be a roasted peacock, but has been reassembled with its original feathers to create a stunning visual display that draws gasps of admiration from the assembled guests. The waste generated by such elaborate presentations seems shocking by contemporary standards, but in medieval thinking, the display of abundance is worth the cost. A lord who can afford to present food as entertainment demonstrates his wealth and power more effectively than any amount of gold jewelry or fine clothing. The message is clear: I have so much that I can afford to play with my food. The hall grows warmer as the evening progresses, heated by the press of bodies, the great fire, and the numerous candles that illuminate the festivities. The woolen clothing that seemed necessary when you first arrived now feels heavy and constraining. You notice other diners loosening their garments or removing outer layers, and you follow suit, learning another small lesson in medieval dining adaptation. The conversations around you provide a fascinating window into medieval concerns and priorities. Trade routes, harvest predictions, the health of livestock, marriages within noble families, religious obligations, and the ever-present threat of warfare weave through discussions like common threads. These are people whose lives are directly connected to the land, the seasons, and the political currents that can shift fortunes overnight. A commotion near the high table draws your attention as a messenger arrives with news from a distant territory falls silent as the hall lord reads the message aloud, sharing information about troop movements, political alliances, and trade agreements that will affect everyone present. This is how news travels in medieval times, carried by riders from feast to feast, court to court, spreading information through the social networks that bind communities together. The evening is far from over, and already you sense that medieval dining is as much about endurance as enjoyment. Your back aches from the wooden bench, your stomach protests the rich, heavily seasoned food, and your head swims slightly from the constant circulation of wine and ale. Yet the social obligations of the feast continue, and leaving early would be a serious breach of etiquette that could damage relationships and reputation. As the candles burn lower and the fire in the hearth settles into glowing coals, the great hall takes on an even more mysterious atmosphere. Shadows dance more dramatically, conversations become more intimate, and the sense of being transported to another time and place grows stronger with each passing hour. The final courses of the evening begin to arrive with an almost dreamlike quality, as if the kitchen has saved its most ambitious creations for when the diners are most stived to recept culinary theatre. A massive subtlety appears, one of those elaborate food sculptures that medieval cooks crafted to display their artistry and their patrons' wealth. This particular creation depicts a castle under siege, complete with tiny marzipan soldiers and sugar battlements that glisten in the candlelight. It's almost too beautiful to eat, which is precisely the point. The carving of this edible masterpiece becomes another ceremony, with the cook himself emerging from the kitchen to present his work. He explains each detail with obvious pride, pointing out the delicate sugar work and the carefully constructed architectural elements. The assembled diners applaud his skill, understanding that they're witnessing not just food preparation, but genuine artistry that will be talked about for months to come. You notice how the quality of light continues to change as the evening deepens. The candles have burned down considerably, their flames now flickering lower and casting longer shadows. Some have guttered out entirely, leaving pools of hardened wax on the wooden tables. New candles are brought and lit, but the overall illumination has dimmed, creating a more intimate atmosphere that encourages quieter conversations and closer connections between diners. The behavior of the assembled guests has evolved throughout the evening as well. The formal restraint of the early courses has given way to more relaxed interactions. People move more freely between tables, engaging in conversations with diners they might not normally approach. The rigid social boundaries that govern daily medieval life haven't disappeared, but they've softened around the edges, allowing for more fluid social interaction. A group of young nobles has organized an impromptu singing contest, with each participant attempting to outdo the others with increasingly elaborate vocal performances. The songs range from courtly ballads to drinking songs that make the entire hall roar with laughter. Even the servants pause in their duties to listen when a particularly talented singer takes his turn, proving that musical appreciation transcends social class in medieval society. And so, as the final embers glow in the great hearth and the last drops of wine are shared, our medieval feast draws to its close. You've experienced dining not as mere sustenance, but as theatre, diplomacy, and survival all woven together in one smoky, chaotic, unforgettable evening. Sweet dreams, and may your own dinner table never require quite so much endurance.